Hey everyone, and welcome. If you're managing a big database estate, you know it can feel less like a neat and tidy library and more like, well, a beast you're barely keeping in its cage. Today, we're going to change that. We are going to build a fortress, a solid framework for getting total visibility and control over your most critical data. All right, let's get into it.
Just think about it for a second. Somewhere, deep in that complex system you manage, is there one database that, if it fell over or got breached right now, would just be an absolute catastrophe? For most of us, if we're being honest, the answer is a pretty scary yes. And that's exactly the kind of nightmare scenario we're here to prevent. You see, the real root of that fear is something I call the database blind spot. It's that nagging feeling in the back of your head that you don't really know what's happening across all of your systems, and you can't protect what you can't see, right? Operating in the dark like that, it's just a recipe for disaster, for downtime, data loss, and security breaches.
So how do we fix this? Well, we build a fortress. And any good fortress is really built on two fundamental pillars of control. First, you need the ability to see what's going on. We call that observability. And second, you need the ability to control what's allowed to happen. We call that governance. Let's start with that first pillar, building our watchtower.
I want you to think of observability as your fortress's main watchtower. From that high vantage point, you can see absolutely everything. Every request, every connection, every potential threat, all across your entire landscape. It's all about getting complete situational awareness. No more blind spots.
Now, how do you see everything without just getting overwhelmed with noise? Well, it's kind of like how a doctor checks a patient's vital signs. For any healthy database, there are really just 4 key indicators you have to monitor. You need to know its CPU usage. How hard is it working? Who's talking to it? Its active connections. How fast is it responding? That's your query latency. And finally, its error rates. Basically, how often is it messing up? And here's where it gets real. This chart shows you exactly how those vital signs apply to actual services on Google Cloud. You can see right away that things like CPU utilization and query latency, they're pretty much universal signs of health for services like Cloud SQL and Spanner. So this isn't some abstract theory, right? These are the actual dials and meters you need to be watching.
So how do you actually make this practical? It's a pretty simple 3-step workflow. First, you have to ingest all these metrics. Just automatically pull them into a central tool like Cloud Monitoring. Second, you visualize them. You create these clean, unified dashboards so you can see the whole picture at a single glance. And third, and this is crucial, you set up smart alerts that tell you when a vital sign is starting to look shaky before it becomes a full-blown crisis. Okay, that's our watchtower. That's how we see what's happening. But that brings us to our second pillar. If the watchtower lets you spot danger, the rulebook, which is our governance, is what prevents that danger from ever happening in the first place. This is about setting the laws of the land and then enforcing them automatically. And this slide makes the difference crystal clear. Your watchtower, observability, it's fundamentally reactive. It's the guard on the wall screaming, "We're under attack." Your rulebook, governance, is proactive. It makes sure the gates are already locked, the walls are high, and the attackers can't even get close. You absolutely have to have both. So what kind of rules are we even talking about? Well, we're talking about preventing these simple but totally devastating misconfigurations. Things like a database accidentally getting a public IP, yikes, or finding out your most critical data doesn't have backups. Or maybe it's missing what's called CMEK. That stands for Customer Managed Encryption Keys, and it basically ensures that you control the keys to your own data. Good governance just stops these critical mistakes right in their tracks.
And the real magic here is automation. This isn't about some poor person with a 200-point checklist manually approving every single change. No way. This is about using automated policy checks to enforce your standards across the board. If someone tries to deploy a database that violates one of your rules, the system just says nope and tells them exactly why. It's a game changer. Okay, so we have a watchtower to see things and a rulebook to control things. So how do we bring it all together? How do we know if we're actually winning? Well, we do it by making a promise, a measurable, non-negotiable promise about our system's performance, and that's known as an SLO.
Now, don't let the formal name, Service Level Objective, intimidate you. An SLO is a really simple concept. It is you, as the person running the service, drawing a line in the sand and saying, our database will be available this percentage of the time, or our queries will respond in this many milliseconds. It's a clear, precise promise that you make to your users.
And to make this super concrete, a really common SLO for a critical database is 99.9% availability, what we often call 3 nines. Now, that isn't just a vague goal. It translates to a specific cold, hard budget for downtime. In this case, it's less than 44 minutes per month. All of a sudden, that becomes the ultimate measure of your success.
And an SLO is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. Not at all. It's a living commitment. You define it way back in the design review. You use your watchtower, all your observability tools, to continuously measure your performance against it. And when you inevitably fail to meet it, you conduct a blameless postmortem to understand exactly why and make sure it doesn't happen again.
So we've covered a ton of ground here. We've talked about watchtowers, we've talked about rulebooks, we've talked about making promises. Let's boil all of this down into a simple, powerful strategy you can use to start building your own data fortress.
You know, it really just comes down to these 3 steps. Number 1, see your system. Build that watchtower and get rid of every single blind spot. 2, control your system. Write your rulebook and automate its enforcement. And number 3, promise its performance. Define your SLOs and hold yourself accountable to them. See, control, promise. That's really the core of the whole model.
And that brings us to the end. I'm just going to leave you with this one question to think about as you go back to your own work. What is the single biggest blind spot in your database fortress right now? Finding the answer to that, well, that's the first step toward building a truly resilient system. Thanks for watching.